Hello, everyone. This is National Master, soon to be FIDE Master Alex King, with my friend and student Mark Louderback. This is our second video. And in this video, we are going to take a look at one or possibly two games of Mark's, which he played recently. Mark, tell us a little bit about this first game that we're going to look at here.
So I participate in the Lichess 45-45 league. It's a team league. You either have like 8 or 10 people to your team, and then you're just matched up with another team, put with someone else your level, and you play, and you're trying to win points, not just for yourself, but for the team, and bring glory and honor
Right.
to the group.
And the time control is 45 plus 45. So
Yeah.
game in 45 minutes with a 45-second increment. So a nice slow time control.
You really have plenty of time to sit and think and to make all sorts of mistakes. Not just you're not in the blitz games and all that. You can only make so many mistakes.
Right. In
Jammed
these you get a
into
lot
that minute.
more, yeah,
A lot more
opportunity. Got it.
time, a lot more opportunity.
So Mark, I get the sense from you that you are particularly motivated by these team events. Would you say that these are particularly exciting for you when you feel like you're, playing for your team instead of just playing individually?
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. I mean, there are other events that you can play in where you're just kind of playing for yourself, that sort of thing. Um, and I've done some of them, and I've actually done somewhat well in some of them as well. But still, there is nothing like playing for a group, knowing that people are kind of counting on you, and that you have to come through. It's not good enough for you to draw. This is it's on the line and all that, and you have to score that 1 point, because that's going to be the difference between victory and defeat. So yeah, absolutely. I really do enjoy playing in the team games, and being a part of the team, and having a team that they're watching my game, they're having conversations about it. It's all recorded. I mean, Lichess does a sort of a very good job of that, but you can kind of just sort of see and keep up and be like, oh, here are some different things that my teammates saw and they commented on. Here are some suggestions and all of that, and being able to go ahead of time, being able to be like, all right, I've got this opening that I really don't do well against, and you guys give me some hints on this, some help. Yeah, I enjoy being a part of that group, being a part of that team, and it's a lot of fun.
Awesome. Okay. Well, let's jump into this game. So this was a game that you played a couple weeks ago.
Yes.
You have sent it to me already, but we haven't looked at it together. So this will be our first time kind of getting our hands dirty with all the
Mm-hmm.
details here. So you're playing white,
Yes.
and the first thing I want you to to tell me is like at what point you were out of your preparation that you had done before the game. Was it at this point where Black played this bishop f5 move?
Yes. When you're in prep and all that, you can take a look at people, because they're on, right. I mean, their games are public knowledge there, and so you can sort of look and be like, okay, what's the opening? What I'm going to be prepping for? How am I going to be, approaching this? And in this game, it's really actually once he played, D6, that I was sort of like, huh. You know, I I had been expecting, you know, I'd been, in all honesty, I'd been expecting E6. I'd been expecting some sort of NIMS. I was expecting something else kind of along those lines, a little more traditional there, maybe going into a decline by sort of a different move order, that sort of thing. But, um, now at this point, I was sort of like, all right, I'm flying by the seat of my pants here. I mean, I'm not lost, but I think it kind of is reflected in, my next move, where I was like, all right, I was just kind of a little
You usually
unsure
play
about what to do.
against like against King's Indian setups. You usually play these lines where you play e4, right? And so when he
Yes,
played bishop f5, you can't play e4 right now, and so then you were sort of unsure about how to proceed from here, right?
that is exactly correct.
Okay, so you played bishop g5 here, and
Hmm.
then you you wrote some notes to this game, which you sent to me, and so you already pointed out in your notes that this is not one of the top couple most popular moves here.
Right.
Those are like
But it's
F3.
not
It's not a
super
bad move,
blunderous,
not a
it's
bad
not.
move, but it's but yeah, so F3 would prepare E4. There's also
Mm-hmm.
this
Mm-hmm.
move G3, preparing to fianchetto, and then
Yes.
there's just knight F3. So those are the three most common moves. And so your move is a little bit less common, but okay, it's reasonable. So then he played knight b to d7, and you played e3.
Mm-hmm.
So you've got a sort of more modest setup with your central pawns here, where you're not
Yes.
trying to force through e4 so soon. You're just trying to get your pieces out, which that's I think that that's a good approach when you run into an opening that is a surprise for you or that you haven't seen before. I think it's
Mm-hmm.
good to not necessarily get in the mindset of trying to punish it or something, but to try to, just develop your pieces solidly, play natural moves. I think that's often a good strategy. Okay, so he played g6, and then you played knight f3. Now, knight f3 in your notes is possibly not the best move because, according
Yeah.
to your notes, playing f3 now really was um, pretty promising looking because then you're actually threatening to like trap his bishop. So it
Yes.
makes sense that f3 would, but I mean, if that's the case, then I wonder whether like playing f3 back here would have made even more sense, because it's like if we're going to play f3 e4, then there's no reason to include e3 first, right? It would imply the loss of a tempo. Although, while you're doing that, he's like meanwhile trapping his bishop more and more. So
Yes.
maybe that actually
Yes.
makes f3 even stronger. But
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I mean, in any event, like I think that in the future, when you face this bishop f3 setup, you'll probably be more, open to the idea of playing f3 and e4, just because you saw in your notes that it was a good move at various moments here. But anyway,
Mm-hmm.
like I said, you're playing logical moves here, so I think it's good that you're playing solidly here. So knight f3.
Yeah, because I am sort of playing to, I'm playing to castle at this point, and that's, the thing about that is that very often when I'm playing against the king's Indian, all right, I'm not playing to castle. I'm playing to chunk up my pawns. I'm playing to, to get very aggressive and to, put pressure on my opponent and really just sort of try to bring in a checkmate and all of that. And so I'll leave my king in the center and, just try to sort of get through that. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. But in this situation, because I was sort of, as I said, because of sort of the odd move order that came about, and just a couple of the odd moves as well. Normally in the King's Indian and all that, you don't have the bishop, sitting out there on f5 to begin with. But yes, that's I kind of dialed back what I was doing, and I just sort of had a little bit more of a standard, a standard setup that you would expect.
Yeah, and again, I think that that's perfectly reasonable. I really do think that that's reasonable. And so your next move, bishop e2, is also just like a normal developing move,
Yep.
although the computer is seeming to suggest that knight h4 is a bit better. Again, trying to take advantage of this bishop on f5. So in an
Mm-hmm.
objective sense, there were probably more ambitious ways you could have played, but again, from a practical perspective, you just developing your pieces and castling, I think, is like perfectly good. So he castled, you castled.
And this is one of the things that that you run into where you're like, okay, do I want to be aggressive in this situation? Do I want to be kind of taking advantage of this, or do I want to castle, get my king to safety, and then sort of let the game play out? And you and I have gone through games where you've seen sort of both tactics and all of that, and you've seen games in which I've gotten in trouble, for not having that sort of a king safety set up here. So in this game, you're sort of like, what, I stand to, I stand to win more than lose by just, you know, playing a kind of a slow plotting game and then just kind of starting to tighten up and put the pressure on. His bishop at this point does not have many squares, to go to.
Yeah, I agree that his bishop maybe um, could be short on squares no matter what. Like whether or not you take advantage of it right away, his bishop could potentially be a liability. I mean, you still have options of playing this, at some
Yes.
point. it's possible that he could try to fix that problem with knight e4, which he didn't play here, but he could have maybe tried this so that after takes, his bishop was like maybe a bit more. Actually, now that I look at it, even this wouldn't be good because knight d2, and actually his bishop is still short on squares. Like if it goes here, it's trapped, and
Hmm.
or if it goes back here, it's still trapped. So like it still could get, too short on squares. So like I don't know. I mean, I guess that just goes to my instinct that like his bishop could be a liability no matter what, even though you haven't taken advantage of it yet. So he played
Right.
e5 here, and then you played knight h4, which was the computer's suggestion a couple moves ago, and the computer
Hmm.
also likes it here, according to your notes.
Yes.
Um, by the way, for our viewers, I'm not looking at the computer evaluation right now. I'm just looking at the moves of the game with Mark's notes, which he wrote his notes to this game with the aid of the computer. So his notes reflect the computer's preferences in a lot of cases. Okay, so now he played pawn takes pawn, but it looks like h6 was maybe better. So I guess the idea of h6 is that after takes, maybe you take
I would
here.
definitely have taken there.
Yeah, yeah, and actually his doubled pawns are like not they're not bad here because like they maybe open up the H file to come down like this, and you've also traded off your dark squared bishop. So the
Yes.
fact that he's missing his dark squared bishop is less of like a problem for him because you will also be less able to take advantage of those dark squares. So it makes
Hmm.
sense that this would have been his best option here, and that instead, when he played this, takes h6, now you were able to keep your dark squared bishop alive, which I think is smart of you. That's good because now, again, you're still putting pressure on this, but he doesn't have a way of just like trading everything off like in that previous line. Okay, so he played
Hmm.
here, and um, and then you took. Now, in your notes, you
Yes.
give this a question mark because it gives up most or all of White's advantage, when instead you should have played f3.
Hmm.
And you're saying in your notes that you were hesitant to play this because it felt that it was weakening for your
Yes.
position, but that it would have been better. Let's talk about why that is. It seems to me that you're maybe trapping his bishop here. Like again, if he goes here, bishop is trapped,
Hmm.
and if he goes back here, I think again you're trapping it here. And then if he comes back here, then here, maybe? I don't know. Maybe he has some sort of counterattack here. I mean, like on your knight, he might have a counterattack like this, but I mean, if you just move your knight, his bishop is still trapped. So I think actually maybe you would have just trapped his bishop
Yep.
here. Even if you didn't trap his bishop, like even if the best you could do here were like trading your knight for his bishop, that would still be great because like then you retain your two bishops, which look great, and like his pawn structure is very weak on the king side now. So even if that were all you achieved, that would be awesome. So that's I think why f3 would have been a better move here instead of taking the bishop. So I guess I think in this
And this is
case, go ahead, Mark.
this is one of the embarrassing moves, where you do it, where you're sort of like, okay, I've got time to sit and think and to sort of ponder and work this around and all of that, and it's because of ghosts. It's because I'm thinking, well, if I'm pushing f3, all of a sudden I'm exposing, the dark squares, and I've had issues. I've remembered issues before, with having checks coming in and on my king, and you're just kind of, as I said, opening up. Even though in this situation, I mean, I still have my dark square bishop. I've got, d4 is, strongly guarded, that sort of thing. But as I said, it's that ghost in the memories of chess games that aren't in the same situation, aren't in the same position, that sort of keeps you from making this move. Even though
Yeah,
later on in the games, I was sort of like, okay, now I really need to try to make this move.
yeah. Okay, so knight takes e4 you played. He took back. And you say in your note that his knight here has a good outpost on e4. I just want to
Yeah.
say that it's not truly an outpost if there's the possibility of it being evicted by one of your pawns. Even if
Right.
that is not likely, like here you played knight f3. I mean, you needed to play knight f3 because he was hitting your knight. And now that
Hmm.
you've played knight f3, it is, of course, harder for you to play f3, but it's not impossible. And you did, in fact, soon evict his knight from there. So, like, yeah, it's not truly an outpost. It could still be a good square. I just wouldn't use the word outpost because that term usually is just for squares that cannot be evicted by a pawn. Okay, so he goes here, and you played knight d2, and then he goes rook e8, you took, he took. Okay, so the position is sort of stabilized a bit. You 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 missed out on a couple opportunities earlier to achieve a
Hmm.
big advantage, and now I think that the position is closer to equal. Although, I mean, I would still prefer white here, to be honest, like because I love the bishops,
Yes.
and even if that's all you have here, and his position is like otherwise healthy, I would still be cautiously optimistic about white's position here. So, all right, so you played bishop f3, and then he played d5, which looks like a reasonable move.
Hmm.
Um, you played queen c2, he played c6. You're completing development, he's completing development, and you go rook a to d1. So all of those moves look pretty normal. And like I
Hmm.
said, his position looks otherwise healthy. His knight does look strong here, whether or not this is officially an outpost. It looks like a good square for his knight. Um, his bishop is like nice and open. His rook is open. You know, his pieces are placed normally. I still would slightly prefer white here. It's just because I'm a bishop partisan, but you know,
Right.
I still would be happy to have white here. Okay, so anyway, so he played b5. Now here is a moment where you took the wrong decision positionally,
Yes.
according to the computer. So you played c5 here when the computer strongly prefers to trade here on b5.
Hmm.
Now, um, I want to get your impression, Mark, about like why that is. I want you to attempt some sort of explanation for what the computer is saying. Why do you think the computer thinks that trading on b5 would be better than what you played, which was c5? And then I'll tell you what I think.
Well, I believe that locking up the center with my bishops isn't exactly, what I want to be doing. I want to be opening up the board, giving them some sort of room to kind of flex their muscles a little bit. And by closing the position, all right, that certainly isn't going to allow that. Um, in addition, C6 right now is it's a backwards pawn, and by sort of locking it in with my C5 move and all that, I'm preventing any way of getting to it. Right? It's this backwards pawn. It's supporting these other two and all that. It's very important to for his support of his knight at this point, but I can't, I'm preventing myself from getting to sort of that defense. Um, Now,
Well,
of
let's
course,
just take those two things you said so far, Mark.
okay.
You said that it would be better to take on b5 because that would open up the position more, whereas what you
Hmm.
played kept it closed. And then you also were talking about this pawn here on c6 affecting your decision. But actually, like, if that pawn is as weak as you're saying it is, then it would actually make sense to keep it there with what you played. I actually think that you were overly concerned with that pawn, and that led you to make the wrong decision because c5 keeps that pawn fixed there. But in fact, that pawn is difficult for you to access because the position is closed up. Whereas you should have taken, allowing him to liquidate it. Then he no longer has a backward pawn, but this is still the right decision, and it's because that pawn is not actually that tangible of a weakness for him. Whereas when you trade it off like this, now there are more potentially more tangible weaknesses for him. These pawns, they're not backward pawns. First of all, I just want to say that the c6 pawn is not actually, I don't consider a pawn a backward pawn unless it's on a semi-open file. So since you don't have frontal access to the pawn, I wouldn't even classify it as backward in the first place. It's just another pawn. And it could be weak or it could be not weak. And in this case, I think it's not actually weak just because you don't have very much access to it. So then if you had traded, I think you would have more I think you would clearly have more access to these pawns here. Like
Sure.
you move your queen, you can put pressure on it. You could use this bishop to put more pressure on it, right? And then even if he defends it, you've got ways to like attack it more to especially because your light squared bishop here is like your unopposed bishop of your two bishops. It's
Hmm.
the bishop that you have
Hmm.
that he doesn't have, and so that means that everything that's on a light square for him is going to be subject to like a pretty thorough inspection by your bishop. So anyway, so that is, I think, but the first thing you said I liked, that it opens up the position. I agree that that's part of why this would have been better. Okay, so you played c5, and then he played b4, which makes a certain sense because like now his bishop is like off of the diagonal of your unopposed bishop, so it's like I don't know, potentially less of a target. So he goes here. You went rook a1 to defend your pawn. He goes here, bishop d3, king h7, and here finally, triumphantly, you
Yes.
evict his knight from this central square. So that again, that's why it was not truly an outpost, because the whole time there was this latent possibility of you evicting it like this, and you finally did that. All right, and now you played b3. Now, even though the computer passed over this b3 move without comment, it's not a move that I find natural, I gotta say. It's not a move that I would play. I don't I'm not convinced it's the most useful move here. There's a few
Really.
things I would be uh, more looking to play here. One thing that I am just slightly worried about in general is his pressure on this,
Hmm.
combined with his implicit pressure on this. So I'm worried, just my spidey sense is kind of worried about some possibility of him sacrificing on e3, sacrificing the exchange on e3, followed by his bishop coming in and taking the pawn on d4. And then like maybe c5 is also hanging. So I would be
Hmm.
tempted, but my instinct is to just eliminate all of those possibilities by playing bishop f2. Um, I guess now that I look at it, probably you might have been worried about this trade where you wouldn't be able to take back with your rook because then this is hanging. I don't know. That might have been part of it. I guess that does
Yes.
explain. I mean, that is a reason why b3 is useful, because then it allows the queen to defend this. So I guess
Hmm.
the more I look at it, the more I see the usefulness of it. The downside, I will say, structurally, of b3 is that it makes it harder to move the a pawn, because then your b pawn isn't supporting it anymore, which means that like if the a pawn can't move, it could just be a target. Like yes, you're defending it, but then you've like assigned your queen the job of defending this weak pawn, you
That is
know?
correct.
So maybe there was another option that would have been better than both of those. But okay, let's just see what happens. So b3, he goes rook e6. Now you moved your bishop. Yeah, again, I know that like I know that your bishop is obviously more active here than it would be here, but I'm still a bit worried about the potential weakness of this. I don't like to just leave undefended pawns in my position, like this. I'm
Hmm.
now worried that at some point he's going to have a knight h5 move where his bishop will be hitting this and his knight will be hitting your bishop. Now, yes,
Yes.
that's not a threat right now, but I'm just worried about it in general, which is why, again, my first instinct is to play bishop f2. But maybe objectively it doesn't make a difference in this case. So bishop f4, he traded rooks and then played rook e8. And so you traded these guys. Now you have to deal with the threat here. And so here is a moment where you played another mistake according
Yes.
to the computer. So first of all, just to reiterate, the computer has considered the position to be roughly equal for the past
Hmm.
many moves, right? Since you missed those early opportunities, like in the opening, the computer has considered black to be within the margin of approximate equality, which by the way, my personal view about what that margin is like half a pawn, plus or minus half a pawn from zero. So
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
anything from minus zero point 0.5 to plus zero point 0.5, I still consider in the approximate equality range. And so the computer's considered you within that range. And but after this next move, it thinks that black is better. So the move that you played is
Yes.
bishop e5. And computer thinks that this is a bad move, after which black is like clearly better. So it's like,
Hmm.
at least -1 for black. Um, Maybe even, could even be closer to -2, within -1 to -2. And it says that the better move would have been to defend the pawn with your queen instead. So instead of trading the bishops. Now again, Mark, I want to hear your impression about like the explanation for that. Like, why does the computer hate the move you played? Um, and why would the improvement have been better?
Well, the computer hates the move that I played because once in the exchange of it, all right, while I was thinking that I was going to be able to kind of, um, have the opportunity to maybe push the pawn a little bit, I know it wasn't a completely passed pawn and all that, but still, kind of a room moving it. Instead, the computer is like, no, you're going to just slowly lose all of the pawns that you have. Because when he plays over and gets his knight onto e6,
Yeah, let's take a
um,
look here because this is what he should have played. When you played bishop e5, computer saying he should have traded. He didn't trade. He played
yep.
knight c7, but he should have traded and then keep saying what you were saying.
Well, once he gets his knight because his knight then goes to a g7 with the idea of going to e6, and now it's blocking my pawn. It's attacking my other pawn. I've got a2, which is I'm having to guard with my queen. It's just I have there are too many balls in the air at this point, and it's all going to start to it's all going to start to sort of come down.
Yeah, exactly. That's a good explanation, Mark. And I think this is a good illustration of how two bishops are way better. I mean, that they're way more than the sum of their parts. You trade off one of your two bishops, and then your remaining bishop can be really handicapped. This guy cannot cover the dark squares. That is
Mm-hmm.
why the two bishops work so well together because they perform perfectly complementary tasks, And so, I mean, here you've just like lost half of your heart here. And so,
Yeah.
yeah, then the dark squares start crumbling. So, yeah, that's why your move bishop e5 wasn't good. That's why he should have traded. He didn't trade. He played knight c7. I guess he was aiming for the same thing, though, right? I mean, he was probably aiming also to play possibly knight e6, hitting this and this. But
Mm-hmm.
the reason why this is not as good is, I guess, your next move, f4,
Right.
which looks like, I guess, a good move because now, like, if he does the same thing, if he trades, now you can take with the f pawn, and then if he
Yes.
plays this, you can actually defend all your stuff and like your dark squares are actually being held together now. Like he doesn't
Mm-hmm.
actually, and you've
Mm-hmm.
got counterplay, and it's not so clear anymore, right? So,
Yes.
um, okay, so
Which,
he
like
played
anything else, when you're playing these games and all that, you're sort of like you get away with stuff. And in the game, I was like, how smart am I? All right, for this
right. It's
amazing
not it's
little.
not revealed until later when you look at it with the computer, like how many mistakes there really were. Yeah.
Yes.
That's why it can be so disappointing and frustrating to analyze your games, which is why people don't do it enough. But yeah, it's good for you because it overrides all these like myths, that you had in your head during the game.
Yes.
Okay, so he played 96, and then here again, you didn't play the best move, I think, for defensive reasons again. So like you took
Yes.
here on g7, and then played queen f2. But computer is saying you should just play queen d2 here. I think the computer is just really preferring to wait for him to take so that you can take back with the f pawn. Um, Although
I don't quite. To me, this seems.
I
You
guess then
know.
he would have this, right?
Yeah.
And then I guess maybe we have this tactic, but then you would be hanging this.
Yeah.
But I guess then he would be hanging this. And I mean, like, materials equal here. I guess this looks like maybe it's getting really opened up and possibly getting into like perpetual check land. Like, let's say
Mm-hmm.
takes and then he takes this, and then you give a check, and then I don't know. I mean, I think all these simplifications into like a queen ending that's getting more and more opened up, I think probably in general tend to increase the drawing margin
Yes.
because both of the kings get more and more, vulnerable to perpetual checks and stuff like
Hmm.
that. So I guess that's probably why this would have been your best defensive chance. So you played this, takes, takes, you played queen f2, and then
Hmm.
he played a mistake here, f5.
Yes.
Whereas the computer is pointing out that after queen a3, now he's finally going to be able to like access all your weaknesses again, and again it becomes like difficult or impossible for you to hold everything together now that his
Hmm.
queen creeps into your position. And if you play like for example f5, trying to create a diversion check, and now you have to like come back and block the check, and then yeah, then like things are just falling apart. Like he just
Right.
starts collecting your pawns and you don't have enough
Yeah.
counterplay. So
Yeah. All
so he
because I played that F3 back, that was the
I don't think it was f3 itself. I think it was it
opening up for that queen
that's a
attack,
good
that
example,
check.
Mark, of how you can sort of like uh, draw, self-justifying conclusions from the games. Like you can read whatever you want, read into the data.
That's
Anyway,
right.
okay, so
That's right.
f5 he played, and then you played g4.
Yes.
So now you're starting to get frisky here, which I think is good. I mean, I think it's good that you're mixing things up so that he doesn't have time to just sort of creep into your position and start inspecting all your pawns. You're shaking things up first. So he takes, and then you played f5.
Yes.
He goes knight g5, and here you guys start exchanging a few more inaccuracies. So
Hmm.
you played queen e2 here, which doesn't look good according to the computer. So computer says queen g3 was better. I think we'll see why that is. Because when you played queen e2, check here, and now he should have played this move. This is the
Yes.
move he should have played that would have been better than what he played. That's why I think back here, queen g3 is what the computer is suggesting, because that prevents his queen c7 resource.
Hmm.
So it stops his queen from being able to like, c7 is just a great square for his queen, I think. Because like here, if he had played queen c7, it's covering all the checks, it's defending this and this, it's keeping your queen tied down to the defense of this. Meanwhile, his knight is still hitting this.
Hmm.
And also, even the queen, at some point, not right now, but at some point, it could also even come in like this. I mean, it's just covers a lot of good stuff here. So he should have played this queen c7, and
Yes.
then black would be
That
doing
would have
very
been
well.
just a brutal, brutal,
It
brutal
would have,
move
yeah, it would
here.
have been a great positional move. I mean, I think that practically speaking, it still would have been a fight. So I don't think it would have been as brutal as the computer says it would be, because the computer sees everything clearly,
Computer sees as
But
winning. Yes.
so I think you playing against your fellow human here, it would have still been a fight. It wouldn't have been as clear as the computer thinks it would. But yes, objectively, it would have been very bad. So instead of
Hmm.
that, he played knight takes d4, which is
Yes.
a big blunder
It
because
is.
it hangs his knight. Now
Hmm.
you picked up his knight with queen e5, which is very natural, but actually, computer points out that you had a forced mate here. Um,
Yes. And that was, I will say that, even in the game, I know I was sort of like, there might be something else here. I might be able to like mate. I might be able to do something, but I have been so concerned and worried earlier because when I was what what you're missing is that when he was playing here, when he was here, and I was thinking, okay, I'm going to come in, I'm going to take with my pawn, and then I'm going to come here and put pressure. I mean, this is just going to be sort of a winning for me here. All right. And taking just kind of a moment and sort of being like, I'm going to, I'm going to lose. So you see stuff like that and you're like, oh my gosh, that's why I was sort of like, okay, I need to put my queen in a, in a location where I'm not going to, get forked. This is, and so that's kind of part of the reason why I moved here. Now missing, G3, that was I should have thought a little bit better about that. But that's sort of the mindset that I was in at that time. So when I had the opportunity here to just say, you know what,
Oh, to
I'm
get rid
going
of
to
the knight,
go,
which was that like dangerous forking thing that you had been so worried about earlier.
yes,
That's why
yes,
psychologically you were in a rush to do that. Yeah, well, that's fine. I mean, honestly, winning the knight is winning objectively. So like it's not a
mm-hmm.
mistake. It's just that forcing mate, of course, is arguably stronger or at least faster. So yeah, you
Mm-hmm.
could have forced mate here, and now he has no way to defend against mate.
Right.
You just have an unstoppable mate. Okay, so anyway, so you won his knight, and oh yeah, again you missed a forced mate here. You had a faster win here, and then you just made him
Yep.
like this. But you were only concerned with the knight. But like I
Mm-hmm.
said, I mean you're up a knight here. He doesn't even have a pawn for it. So, as long as you can keep things under control from here, then you'll be winning anyway. So that's fine. And it looks like you did do that. It looks like you did keep everything under control. And here I think you made the smart, practical decision to force the trade of queens, even though that gives up, your extra, it gives up a pawn here.
That
But I
gives up
still,
a pass pawn that is, I mean, that close to, you know, uh, uh, to, to winning the game as a queen and all that. But yeah, in this situation, I was sort of like, you know what, I'm going to force this. I'm going to, you know, just get into an end game that I am extremely confident that I'm going to be able to win.
yeah,
Having an extra piece, yeah,
Yeah, I mean when you're up material, I mean when you have a winning position, making a move like this that like minimizes risk for yourself while still retaining a healthy margin of winning advantage. I think that that's practically smart. So I think it was totally fine that you did that. Now, he manages to win another pawn, but like yeah, he didn't even actually execute winning the second pawn because probably he saw
no,
that even when he does that, it's like completely hopeless for him, because your pieces are so active and he has so little counterplay with only his king, like both of his extra pawns are like bad, they're like blockaded, and you're about to collect them any second now, right? I mean, once the pawn
mm-hmm.
moves run out, he has to give up that pawn, and then probably the
Yep,
same thing is going to happen here with the other pawn too. You just come in and take that, and then he doesn't have any extra pawns anymore. So
right,
so again, I think that this justifies your decision to force the trade of queens because this endgame, even in the best case, was just hopeless for him. So then you pretty much just cleaned up from here. You collected his extra pawn, and then you ran him out of waiting moves, and now he's just dead. And so he
yeah,
he resigned here. You won the game. So yeah, um, overall, I think you definitely played better than your opponent in this game. Um, and which makes sense. I mean, you're 100 points higher rated than this guy on
yes,
Lichess in classical, and so it makes sense that you would be outplaying him, even though you didn't play perfectly either. I mean, you made some mistakes. It's just that he made more mistakes, and you did a better
mm-hmm.
job taking advantage of his mistakes than he did taking advantage of your mistakes. So yeah, it was nice, Mark. I think that this was a good game. I got to say, Mark, that I think that in like the past couple months, I've said this to you before, but I think in the past couple of months, I do see you playing like on a higher level than you had been playing before. I think that you are playing better positional moves in general. Like
Mm-hmm.
your average normal move is just of a higher quality than it used to be. So I think you just have better instincts, better evaluation. And I also think that like you're making fewer bad moves than you used to make. Like it used to be that you were making more serious tactical errors and oversights, and you're doing a better job of keeping those under control and avoiding those. So those two things of like increasing the level of your average move and decreasing the amount of your worst moves. I mean, those two things. I mean, that's pretty much how everybody gets better. That
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
that's what comprises improvement on any level. That's what would
Right,
comprise improvement on my level too. Playing
right.
better average moves and making fewer bad moves. So yeah, it looks like progress, man. This
Well,
is
thank
good.
you.
Let's keep it up. Okay, we're gonna sign off for now. But thanks for checking out this second video of myself, National Master Alex King, my friend and student Mark Louderback, and we hope to see you guys for another video soon. So take care.